All right. I am so thrilled to introduce our final keynote speaker. She comes to us all the way from the West Coast via Austin, Texas, where she was speaking at Artifact Conference this week. She has also spoken at Clarity Conference, Gina's design system conference, as well as Front Conference, which is about the intersection of product management and product design. So basically, she speaks at all of the conferences I wish I had the budget to go to. Which is a big reason we really wanted to bring her to Durham so all of you could get to enjoy her tonight. So she has a background in doing brand design at Ogilvy. She has worked on product design and design systems at eBay. She is currently a senior UX design director at Indeed.com. That means she manages teams of product designers working on a product that most of us have looked at least once or twice. Please give a warm welcome to Kim Williams from Indeed.com.
Okay. Howdy, UX y'all. I am so excited to be here with you. Thank you so much to Ren and Melissa for the invitation. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about what I've been learning about designing for impact, even defining what impact means, whether that's pitching a specific initiative, pitching a new feature, or managing a centralized team. And I hope that my sharing of what I've learned through failures, through triumphs, all of these insights might be helpful to you. So a quick hello about myself. My name is Kim Williams, you already know that. But as Ren was mentioning, I started my career in advertising. So a lot of that had to deal with pitching, acquiring new clients, and then for the past 5.5 years in product design. And it's a different kind of pitching, I think, for investment in new initiatives, projects, features, and working really closely with product leaders and executive sponsors to fund projects like an accessibility initiative, which is what we'll talk about a little bit later. And I always start every talk with a little bit about myself. So what you see here is my sister's birthday party in Jamaica. I was born in Jamaica, and my whole family's from there, and we came to the States when I was about 7 years old. And so I'm the youngest of 3, and my brother is the rebel. My sister was always the peacekeeper, trying to, always keep us together and happy and cohesive. And I was always the instigator. I was always asking lots of tough questions, provoking everybody, starting the fights, but learning so much from that. And being that person that's always the instigator shapes the way that I think. And I think the experience of coming to another country, moving around a lot, and always being different in circumstances and learning to be resilient and adaptable has really shaped the way that I think about careers, and also how I'm thinking about switching on that entrepreneurial side of my creative and product design journey to connect more closely with product leaders. So first, how do we even define what impact means? I'm sure this means different things to everyone, and I've just got a really, really simplified, super simplified way of talking about its demonstrated value for milestones in long-term initiatives or milestones in short-term initiatives. I mean, that's pretty a basic definition, but what I really want to emphasize is how we even determine what is valuable, and what is valuable to a company is going to be the focus. And also, what I'll be sharing is tried and true tools that I've used to determine what is value. So how do you determine value? So the first question I think is super important to ask is, how does your business work? I'd love to make this more of a conversation. So any brave soul want to raise their hand and tell me a little bit about their company that they work for and like how their business works? Any brave soul at the end of the day? Any hands? One hand there. So if you tell us like the company and how the business works.
I'm sure there's somebody here who will laugh the way I explain it, but I work for Red Hat, and the way that we basically sell free software. But it's a little more complicated than that. You buy a subscription, and what that buys you is software that's been has had all the bugs fixed. It basically starts as open source software, but then we do some extra things to make sure that it's stable and has been quality assured and those kinds of things. And then we also provide support and documentation. So basically, when you're getting the free software, you're actually getting something that's more than just open source. It's stable, it has support, it has documentation. So that's my company. And I'm sure somebody from Red Hat will be like, well, she left out that. But that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that was a great way to characterize that. You were speaking to what the offer is, the subscription model. And I'm sure that that's probably a key thing that the company looks at. And so a really great way at thinking about how does your company work is asking these 4 questions. What are the key revenue drivers? How does the company make money? Like, what are the ways in which they do actually make money? 2, how are the drivers for the metrics built or designed, and by whom? The by whom piece tells you who created it. The by whom ideally lets you know what part of the business is prioritized. Maybe you have a GM structure, and maybe you have different GMs, but they're tiered. So these kinds of questions help you understand priority within the company. So once you know revenue drivers, how those metrics are built and designed by whom, then you want to look at the correlation with what are the top metrics that the company is tracking. Are they tracking subscription models, like how many subscribers that they have active with the platform? Are they tracking experience? Are they tracking operational efficiency? What are like the top company-wide initiatives happening within your company right now? And then also, who does the reporting on the company-wide metrics? And this person should be your best friend. Because this person sees all of the proposals and the pitches that are going to all of the C-suite. So they'll be able to validate any idea you might have. They might be able to share with you templates that others are using. They will be able to give you an overview of their first take at your initiative proposal, your feature proposal, your product proposal. Whoever is doing the reporting knows the ins and outs of what the executive team values and how they value the initiatives. So if you know what's most important to a company, you know what they value. And any proposal without the context and confirmation of value is a non-starter. I mean, those are just what I've learned. So context being, how does whatever it is you're proposing relate to top-level metrics or top-level revenue initiatives, as well as confirmation being, do you have executive sponsorship? Who is putting their name on the line to say, this is worthwhile, I would like to back this as well. And all of that influences whether you get headcount for an initiative, whether there's external spend that might be allotted. Maybe you need to have a contractor support an accessibility initiative. I'm using accessibility because that's something that a centralized team would do, and often sometimes something that you do have to advocate for. So let's say you have to get headcount for someone to manage that program, get an external spend for an auditing of your existing products to see where are they within accessibility standards. Roadmap alignment. So you might have your own ideas of what that accessibility program could look like, but whether or not it's effective is how many other products agree that actually that is valuable, and we will alter our roadmap to accommodate what you're proposing. So you have executive sponsorship, but then you also need your peer sponsorship, who is going to come alongside you and say, we agree, and here's how it could work. Here's how accessibility could work within this part of the business, and here's how this could happen in Q4 and Q1. So you basically need champions at all levels. And so roadmap is at the highest level of alignment. And I put in here OKR alignment. Now OKRs, objectives, key results, every company uses a different language for how they track and determine their initiatives and progress. And we'll talk a little bit more specifically about OKRs, just because that's a framework that I've recently come to know. But it could be however your company is actually measuring the detailed tactical implementation of a roadmap. And I put alignment here because that's how you're connecting with other teams. It's one thing for you to create an initiative, it's completely different, or a feature, but how does that connect with other cross-functional products that are related? And so that's where the alignment comes in. But the bottom line is, though, none of this happens if there isn't clear value determined and validated at both the executive level and with your peer level for what is feasible. And then you've determined value. You want to start to look at what is defined as risk, mitigating risk, to validate for yourself, doing the due diligence to know that your proposal will in fact work and have positive impact. So Silicon Valley Product Group is a really, really great resource. If folks, if you haven't heard of it, it's just a really awesome blog. And they just have tons of resources. But I love this one that they have on mitigating risk. And they identify 4 different types of risk. One is value. So whether customers will buy it, or users will choose it, or choose to use it. This is kind of almost along the lines of desirability. Will people actually be interested in the feature, product, or initiative? Usability risk. Can users figure out even how to use it? Will it be intuitive? Feasibility risk. Can our engineers, so looking at the talent that is currently within your company, currently within your team, almost like a skills assessment. Do we have the engineers that can build what you're proposing in the time, skills, and technology that's already present? And is the answer yes? Is the answer no? If it's no, how would you augment it? What would you suggest? Is there someone in another team that is capable? So maybe not on your direct team, but Tim in another team has this capability, and a part of your proposal is 100% of his time for 3 quarters to test it out. So really, really determining, do you have the skills? If you don't, can you pitch? Are the skills anywhere in the company? If it's not anywhere in the company, what external resources would you recommend? or are you requesting headcount? And then lastly, business viability. So whether the solution also works for the various aspects of the business itself. And so within that context, are you pitching a product that's completely new? If so, does it relate to the ways in which the business already makes revenue? Or is it a whole new revenue model? Is it a whole new working formula? I mean, I think the first and foremost thing to know is that if you're already using the existing revenue model, it'll definitely be easier to pitch and sell. If you're suggesting something completely new, some other things that you can think about is, does your company have sandboxes that you can test out? So sometimes companies have like co-branded products. So for example, Indeed has Simply Hired. Simply Hired is a co-branded product. It has its own brand, but it is also an Indeed property. And so sometimes we might test and launch a big feature on a co-brand, validate it, make sure that it actually works. And if it works, then port it over to Indeed. So that's like another way to think about that. But essentially, you want to, when you're pitching for a new initiative, new feature, new product, think through, is it a part of the core revenue stream and revenue model? For example, the subscription suggestion, like, is it building off of that? Or is it simply completely different? If it's completely different, the stakes will be higher for you to validate how it could work. And then a part of defining value is really understanding that it's about co-creating how this can work with your executives. It's not, don't feel like the burden is on you to do all of the heavy lifting because you won't have all the answers. I think that that's kind of the key thing, that you're co-creating this plan with executives and with your peers. And this is a really great framework. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. You probably are. I'm seeing some nodding heads. The Lean Canvas. I love this because it says that your business plan for your product, your feature, your initiative, or centralized team does not have to be some 50-page long, scary, daunting document. It can be this one-page canvas. And we can talk about the different parts of it. So at the top here is problem definition, and it's list your top 1 to 3 problems that you're trying to solve. And then right below it, what are the existing alternatives? So what's out there right now that could potentially be solving these problems directly? And then we have here in the top solutions. So you've listed problems. What are your proposed solutions for those problems in your proposal for this feature, product, or initiative? I've highlighted key metrics here because I want to do a deeper dive into OKRs. And so that's what we'll touch on in terms of this whole canvas. I'll spend a little bit more time doing a deeper dive on key metrics. So with the metrics, it's for this proposal and the problems that you've defined and how you believe the solutions are going to solve those problems. How are you going to know whether or not those problems have been solved is the metrics part. How do you validate whether or not you've solved the problem? And then the unique value proposition is, what is that compelling part of it, the compelling message that makes how you want to solve that problem different from anything else that's out there. And just below it, there's a high-level concept. I love that idea that you have just like this pithy way of capturing your proposal. So this was like YouTube equals the flicker of videos. And so that pithy way of capturing, like, what is it that your proposal is solving for? The unfair advantage, I see that as like a finer point on what the unique value proposition is. It's something that no one else can copy, it's uniquely yours, and it's ownable. And then just below there is channels. So how are you outbound reaching your customers, and how are they reaching you coming inbound? And then lastly on the right, who are all of the folks that would really, really benefit from what you're proposing in your feature or your product or your initiative? And these customers could be internal too, right? They're not always external. If you're talking about a design system, that customer is really internal. It's the internal like dev and design teams. But who are all of the different types of segments that would benefit? Of those segments, who would be the early adopters? Who would be the champions that you should prioritize? And then at the very bottom there is your cost structure. So your fixed cost, like what is gonna be like your cost to do the work, your cost of doing business. So if you're managing a centralized team, I look at this as your P&L. The revenue streams are your profit, and your cost structure, like your fixed costs, could be your L's, your losses. So the bottom is how you think about that. But all of this together is the one-page document that you can use to really, really firm up your proposal in a succinct way to procure investment. And once you have that investment, then it's about taking that responsibility and the due diligence to say, now that I have this, how am I going to be a really, really good steward of the funds that I've been given, the head count, the permission to execute on this initiative? How can I demonstrate consistent execution and measurement? And then this is me diving into OKRs. And full transparency, when I first saw OKRs, I was terrified. I'm not gonna lie. It took me months before I got my head around, okay, this is how I can use this. And so I'm showing you an accessibility initiative here. But to the left there, the book Measure What Matters is a really, really great tool to get your head around OKRs. And then the whatmatters.com website has tons of really valuable resources for this. So this is just a snapshot of what it is and how you can think about it and how you can measure it. So if we're proposing an accessibility initiative to deliver an accessibility program that improves UX and reduces, this is a fictitious company, Orange's Americans with Disabilities Act legal risk. So that high level is the initiative proposal and captures the value to Orange, the company. The value is mitigate legal risk and improve overall user experience. And what I did with these OKRs, the O's below define exactly how the project is going to be accomplished. So I have the first O being approval, obtain all required approvals and investment for execution. And the way that I think about it, the KRs will likely be changing quarter over quarter. But I suspect getting approval for a program like this will be a multi-quarter initiative. I may not get all of those approvals within the first quarter. I may not get all of them within 2 quarters. Sub KRs for that could be that it requires a bi-weekly presentation. So another way you can kind of track progress on this, I could have put in there KR 12 workshops with SLTs and track that. And at the very end, so I have SLT approval, determined who, so CTO, general counsel, so it's our legal representative, SVP of product, so that's three of 3. So let's say this is an end of quarter report. Then I have 1 being I successfully, or the team successfully achieved that product, or this KR. So you want to be able to define what it is and how you're measuring success, ideally with a number, and then this last bit is the score. So you take the fraction and you divide it out and get a number. So the second one I have here is execution. So first, approvals, execution, tactical deployment of the program. Whoops, I touched the mic. Sorry. Execution, so tactical deployment of the program. So the first one is resolve high priority issues on most traffic pages, including the homepage. And so let's just say there are a total of 54 high priority issues, and I've addressed, or the team has addressed 43. So we're at 0.8, which is still pretty high. Then the next one here, refactor components to be WCAG 2.1 compliant by resolving 60 of 60 issues, 1.0. So you kind of get the idea here that it's, all of these are the hows of how we're going to be doing the work quarter over quarter, and you find a way to track and measure your progress and be able to rate yourself at the end. Maintenance, established methods for ongoing education and improvement. So part of the program is not just doing the work, not just getting the approvals, doing the work, but then also having ways that other people can understand what accessibility means. And a part of that is education. So creating accessibility guidelines, could be training materials, launching trainings globally, could be some other KRs under here. All right, and then this is just an example here just to show that you can really make OKRs for any kind of initiative. This is orange.design, which would be like a website to have Orange's thought leadership on UX. So establish Orange as a trusted UX thought leader. One, build the platform itself, so launch a redesign as well as a medium publication, define an editorial vision, publish 6 articles per quarter. So that's kind of doing the work is the top. And then the bottom is how are we evaluating whether or not what we're putting out there is trusted, is interesting, is engaging, is valuable to anyone. Because there's one thing to just put it out there, but having some qualitative and quantitative measurement of the work that you're putting out there is really important to validate. And so the first, you have an increase in the average combined views to 5K per month. Increase to medium followers could be another. And then the last one, email signups to 150 by end of year. And this one we asterisk. We just say, you know, actually that was a really over-ambitious target, and we're going to need to change the KR entirely. And that's a good thing. KRs are supposed to be really, really ambitious. If you make all of your KRs, it feels like you're sandbagging just a bit. Like you're just like, okay, I'm just like putting in there what I know is possible, and I'm not stretching for really pushing myself, pushing the team in an ambitious way. And I think the other part of it too, I tried to make this chart, and I think this is how I think about the hierarchy of OKRs. The bottom is you've shipped your OKRs, and it's like we've done everything we said we would do towards this proposed initiative. That's like baseline awesome. But to be even more awesome would be to have some indirect movement, some proxy metric that connects it back to a company-wide OKR. So going back to the accessibility proposal, if that tied into a larger company-wide OKR that it moved the metric on, that would be even more impactful. I'm trying to think of like what that would be. Like I think operational efficiency and just like the legal risk part of that. And then at the highest tier of that is directly moving a company-wide OKR. So I feel like that's like the holy grail. If the company says this is what's most important and you and your team can directly move that, is amazing. So that's how I think about like the most value. And then lastly, it's just that transparency is everything. So with all of the work that you're doing, like having that consistent reporting that anyone can kind of drop in on your work and know where you're at with it. Because again, they've entrusted you with this investment. They've agreed that it's valuable. And so them being able to see, so executives and peers being able to see their return on investment consistently over time is good. And it's also okay if something doesn't work. Like let's say your pitch was for a feature and the feature was not successful, but you learned something new that helped trigger another idea for another feature. That is also a win. We think of that as a strategic pivot. So if the outcome is a strategic pivot or further investment in the project, those are both wins. Lastly, go for it. I didn't want to make this too long because I really want to hear more about like what it is you're going through, what projects you're working on right now that you're looking to get funding on, and what are some challenges. So I'm going to open it up in just a bit, but just want to encourage everyone to kind of go for it. This is really interesting. This is Bloom's taxonomy. I don't know if y'all have seen this before. I'm new to this. So I just discovered this like last week and I was just like, what? And my mind was like immediately blown. But I think that it's so interesting to me. So I think UX is like this little, the top part, like analyze, evaluate, create, like if I look at it. And UX, not saying that that's exclusive to design professionals, UX being everyone participating in investing in user experience. I see it as this top. It's designing, it's coming up with the new work, new proposals, new ideation, evaluating it, analyzing it. And I see that the business core of it, like knowing how the business works, scaling that business, that part of it is almost repetition. It's almost where you're kind of keeping the core strong. And I see the core as the bottom three, and innovation as like the top three. I just thought that was interesting. I also think it's interesting that Bloom suggests that the highest form of intelligence and education is creativity. And so oftentimes, as creatives, whether you're a researcher, designer, PMs that are creatively inclined, sometimes we can be discouraged to crunch the numbers and write business plans and do the pitching and think that that's a left brain activity. Wait, where's that right brain? Point being that that it's for someone that's not creative, and I guess I want to encourage everyone here in this framework of Bloom's taxonomy, with creativity being the highest form of intelligence, adding creativity to the business. I think bringing together qualitative and quantitative, bringing together these two to create significant impact within our companies and with the products that we wish to bring to the world. So the last call is just to be the entrepreneur within, no matter what your role is within your company. Thank you. So yeah, I would love to open it up for like questions or hear what are some of the things y'all are thinking about. And I know
I'm curious, as someone who launches these sorts of initiatives within a fairly large organization, how many initiatives might you launch per year? Or what's a typical time frame for something like this where you're trying to move the needle?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It depends on like what the initiative is. Like something like design systems, like that's a multi-year initiative. That's like 2.5 years in the making. Accessibility is about a year in for us. So yeah, some of them are multi-year initiatives. Some initiatives are smaller. It just depends on what the initiative is, how far along the company already is with those initiatives, that determines like the time frame for what an initiative could look like.
Okay, so earlier you talked about metrics and tying that back to your design project. One question I have is, when you see a metric move, how do you claim that it's design? Because everybody wants to claim, oh, that was me. We moved it, the dial this much. How do you come back to say, okay, the design work contributed quite a bit to that ROI or whatever the metric is?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that this is where your relationships and your partnerships with product leaders all throughout the company make a really, really big difference. With something like, for example, design system, it's really hard to quantify that. But the ways that we would find the metrics is like through our relationships. So let's say the job seeker side of the house. So we're organized in different GM structures, and a PM from the job seeker side noted that once they applied the design system, there was a 5% increase in sponsored clicks or whatever the core metric is. It's relying on those partners that as they're applying the system to flag those things for us. Or maybe you could have some team members where that's what they do. Like a part of, like 10% of their work stream is to be on the hunt, to like look across to see like where they could see those metrics happening. Maybe you could have a product leader that's on your team help with that kind of measurement as well. But it's so important to validate the work and to be able to stand behind the work if you can show that correlation, that when we change this text string, I don't know if there are any content designers here, but like when we change the words, how that increased or decreased, to be able to point to the impact and then use that to refine, edit, and make further improvements. But I think it's not something you can do by yourself. I think it's product leadership within your team and connecting with other product leaders as well.
Additional questions, thoughts?
So when you're at a small company like I am and you're really the only person who has any real stakes in like the website, the UX, the design, how can you apply these when you're talking to other people who don't really understand it and you don't really have like a product owner or anybody like that? You just have like your main boss you're talking to. How do you still apply these same principles to help you talk to your boss in a way that they can understand where their return on investment is coming from?
Congrats for being a UX team of one. I think because you're a UX team of one, it's all the more important for you to be able to speak in the language that your company speaks. So like I said, I was referencing OKRs. What is it that your company uses?
I guess our KPIs.
Okay.
So we're a trade publication. So click-through rates on articles, how long people are spending on them.
Yeah, so I think it's all the more important with you being the only person to see how you can connect the dots between the work that you're proposing and how the company speaks in terms of their values. And so I think it's just all the more important. And to your point, like, how do you apply more specifically for you? It depends on is there a specific example of something that you're working on right now?
For example, my boss is really wanting us to up our SEO, and so I've been doing a lot of work in that realm, trying to figure out how to really up our rankings.
Yeah, okay. So you're tasked with how can you improve SEO, how can you up your rankings? I could see you doing, and this is one thing I didn't share, but you could do like a tree of all of your different hypotheses, right? And you could track, we're gonna do we're going to test, 10 hypotheses or 5 hypotheses for this. So you have your hypothesis at the top, and then what you think might happen as a tree, and you can track that and see like what were the results of each one. So you can, I guess what I'm saying is, you already have a plan, but it's almost like documenting it in a more methodical way and being able to translate it. So I think if you were to document it and say, this quarter we're doing 5 tests for SEO, our hypothesis is this, we expect that we'll be able to increase subscriptions by making this call to action, and then see if it works or not. So just being a little bit more methodical with how you document your work and how you're thinking about tracking it. Because someone else could take a look at that and say, this is interesting, have you considered this other hypothesis? Or it might be interesting if we try it this way. And so don't feel like you have to do it yourself since you're the only UX person, but finding ways to document it and make it more methodical and then co-create what those hypotheses could look like. Yeah.
Going once, going twice.
So I'm 100% in agreement with this talk. I think it's great, and I'm a former product manager that's now managing a UX team, and so I think this is really helpful. I worked at a company in the past where they were using OKRs, but they were really kind of focused on just output and not outcome, and not user-centric outcome, and so I had a hard time trying to align with that, where they're just like, just release things, release features. And so how do you align when you actually aren't aligned?
That's a really great question. And then the way that I see that is having like counterweight OKRs. So one might be tactile, like, increase X, but how do we know that that's actually a good thing to increase X? Maybe the counterbalance of that is, and they stayed on the site longer, or you increased X and there's some other quality measurement. So kind of back to the example of, orange.design. We would put out these editorial articles, but how would we know if they were good or not? We would see reshares or increase in followers. So that's how I see it. Like there's a balance between the metric that we want to see and the metric that would tell us from a user experience perspective, this is actually a good thing. I hope that makes sense, but I think it's more of like, how do you always keep a counterweight?
Final thoughts? Kim, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much.